So let me ask you a question. Are you stressed? Have you ever been stressed? If this is a no, then maybe this live stream isn't for you. But my guess is that most everyone listening today has had an opportunity where they need to find a way to manage stress. So today we're going to talk to you and share some tips on some simple daily habits to manage stress before it manages you. Welcome to the Vegan Gym Live. I'm Dr. Daphne Bascom. I am your host, and I am so excited that you're here with us today. Our goal is to bring you actionable strategies that you can apply to your plant-based lifestyle to help you navigate your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep, your stress, your social connection, how to avoid toxins in your life, and how to use data to intelligently optimize your health. And today, returning for a second visit to the Vegan Gym Live is Coach Tiana. Good morning, Tiana.
Good morning, Daphne. So excited to be back and looking forward to our conversation today. I think it's another important one.
I do too. I'm coming to the community from a skilled nursing facility in Starver, Pennsylvania. So I have a little sense of what stress is like. Tiana, what is stress, and why do you think stress is such a prevalent issue today, especially for people who are navigating health and wellness goals?
Yeah, and I think the reason this is so important is because I think a lot of time we don't realize how big of an impact stress can have on our health and fitness goals. So basically, stress is our body's natural response to a perceived threat. So it can be a physical, emotional threat, but it triggers that fight or flight response. And there's kind of two types of it, right? There's the one that happens in short bursts that can be helpful in certain situations, like if you're getting chased by a bear, you need that stress, right, in order to survive. And your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, and it helps you in those situations. However, more of a troubling type of stress is the other kind of stress that is more chronic. And it really, it can affect everything in your life. It can be harmful to your body. It can affect your sleep, your digestion, your progress in the gym, your appetite. And it can reduce, if you're on a fitness journey and trying to grow muscle, it can reduce muscle growth. And just overall, it impacts your well-being. And so if it's not managed, it really can lead to you feeling frustrated and feeling like you're stuck or in a plateau and not seeing the results. And I think this is really hard to escape because we live in a world that's always on, like everything is always on, and technology is helpful on one side, and we'll talk about, some ways to use technology to manage stress in today's conversations. But, being able to just be available all the time and notified from every different angle, it just naturally will increase stress levels. And then on top of that, I think also, all of the other things, social life, family, work, it's a lot to juggle, I feel like. And it's definitely, it can add that pressure as well. And when you're trying to work towards your goals, having that pressure, if it's not managed well, can definitely make the whole process a lot more challenging.
100% agree. And just again, to recap for our community, there's what we call eustress, EUSTRESS, and that's a good stress. So there can be stress related to having a baby, getting married, life changes. But to Tiana's point, the distress are kind of the life stressors that aren't acute, that tend to be prolonged, and that tend to have a significant impact on our physiology and actually can keep us from achieving our goals. And a lot of times I think people just want to double down. They're going to double down on their nutrition. They're going to double down and they're going to train harder, which is a stress, by the way. But really, Tiana, what you're saying is you need to acknowledge that you're stressed and manage that in order to help move forward.
Absolutely.
So you've been coaching for a long time. What are some common signs that you see that stress is starting to take control? I won't say take over. that stress is starting to impact someone's life?
Yeah, I like to kind of divide these into different categories. And sometimes it's hard to identify because all of these things that we're talking about can come from other reasons as well. But usually, like if you're able to identify multiple of these and it's something that continues to happen, it's a really good sign that your stress levels are heightened and that it should be something to pay attention to and start working on. I think some of the more noticeable ones in the day-to-day life is your irritability and mood
Mhm.
swings. You feel like you can, easily get frustrated and you feel short-tempered. Um, you're feeling just overall more tired. It's like that constant fatigue, even if you're getting enough sleep and you feel like you're doing everything right, but you're still feeling exhausted, whether it's when you wake up or throughout the day. Speaking of sleep issues, if you're having difficulty staying asleep or falling asleep, that can be a sign of stress as well. Maybe you have like trouble focusing at work. You just like notice that your attention span is not as good as it used to be. And then on a more of like fitness and nutrition level. With fitness, I think it's kind of easier to identify those things sometimes because a lot of the time you can get to your recovery diminishing in your workout. So you'll just notice that it takes a long time for your body to recover and bounce back. The soreness just lasts a lot longer. You're not able to progress in your workouts. Now, I will say that these things are normal even without stress, right? It happens. But if you just continue to notice that this is happening over and over again, and you feel stuck for a really long time, even though you're following a structured program and you're just not able to progress, and then all of these other kind of symptoms are showing up, that's a pretty good sign that, again, your body is just feeling more stressed out than usual. Also, your motivation might go down to exercise.
Mhm.
If you're
Yep.
feeling stressed, if you're feeling fatigued and tired and irritable, it's like you're not going to be as motivated to work out. Um, from the nutrition perspective, it can lead to changes in your appetite. So I have some clients who are, when they're feeling stressed out, they're more of a type where, well, now I don't feel like eating at all.
Uh-huh.
And then whole
The
other
other
like
side.
yes, yes, where it's like eating everything in sight.
Yes.
I think that's kind of like person to person dependent on based on how everyone handles stress. But yeah, major changes in your appetite. Um, you might notice even like digestional discomfort as
Mhm.
well, just feeling more bloated, acid reflux as well. So those are some of the most common ones. Again, I would say like if it's just like one of these things showing up, like it might not be stress, but if you notice like multiple of these happening for some time, it's a pretty good indicator that your body is feeling more stressed out than it should.
So basically, you're saying that stress can have a total body response. You've touched on systems from head to toe, and that how it manifests may be different for each individual. But if you're finding these persistent changes, that you need to have that conversation with your coach or with yourself so that you can start to unravel what it is causing your stress. Because I'm sure that you've probably found that there's some simple things that you can, whether it's habits or recommendations that you make to people on how they can manage stress on a daily basis. Because chronic stress is bad. We all know that. And but to your point, our our life feels like we're always on, and that, which is not good. But what are some things that you recommend or that you implement in your own life so that you can manage stress better day to day?
Yeah, and I think what you said at the beginning was so important because sometimes it feels like we're doing everything right, right? You're getting your workouts, you're showing up every day, you're eating healthy, and then you just feel frustrated that you're not seeing the results. And it's
Mhm.
hard to acknowledge that it's coming from stress because it's something that it's kind of like less tangible, right? It's harder to control that part than it is to, eat healthy or work out sometimes. Like that's a simple solution. You have like a formula of how to do that versus with stress it's a lot more complicated, it's a lot more like individualized, but there are definitely some of the I would say, like common tools and small daily habits that you can use to help manage that. We talk about movement. I think that's a really,
Yeah.
really important one. It doesn't have to be a 2-hour workout. It shouldn't be a 2-hour workout at the
Yeah.
gym every single day, right? Sometimes even just going for a 10-minute walk to help you reduce your stress levels and kind of just calm down and clear your head can be super helpful. I had this situation of something triggered me in the moment last week, and I'm like, I can sit here and I can like just be mad or be stressed out and do something that I'm not going to be proud of later, or I'm just going to remove myself from the situation and go for and it literally was a 10-minute walk. And sometimes that can be really, really helpful when you're feeling kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I think breathing techniques and meditations can be really helpful. I will say one of these things is like with these practices, it's easy to, and I made this mistake, it's easy to like only feel like you need to do them when you're feeling distressed, and when you're feeling stressed out or anxious, it's really important to do them daily. So even when you're not feeling stressed, even when everything is perfect, it's really important to have these habits in place so that you are able to better handle when a distressful situation does happen. So things like breathing, meditation. I love progressive muscle relaxation as well.
Mhm.
Or EFT tapping can be a good option. And I mean, we can do a whole separate training on that, but I think some of those are really helpful. And even if it's just like 5 to 10 minutes per day, it can really make a difference if you're doing it daily. Um, in general, limiting screen time,
Mhm.
that always helps.
Yeah.
So, especially before bed, if you're noticing that your sleep is declining, making sure that you're limiting your screen time at least like an hour before bed would be ideal. Um, I think it's also just important, outside of just those daily habits, the boundaries that we set. I think a lot of times you're just pulled in every single directions, and so setting boundaries with your schedule, with your time management, really does help reduce stress overall. And then, all of the basics that we always talk about, getting your water, getting your nutrients, that helps a lot. I know it doesn't always eliminate stressful situations from our life, but with stress, a lot of the times it's how do we react to that stress rather than changing the situation itself. And all of those small daily habits help a lot.
And Tiana, are there any nutritional recommendations? I know that many people are turning to adaptogens like ashwagandha, rhodiola, things that, the first thing, and this is for everyone listening, you have to identify the source of the stressor.
Mhm.
So, not addressing the root cause and putting a band aid on it with supplements or adaptogens or herbs or behavior change will just slow the bleeding. It won't necessarily heal the wound. So, part of what you need to do is to unravel what are the sources of stress and then start to address them, because that's going to be the sustainable path forward long term. But in your experience, have you found any benefits to any supplements or herbs or adaptogens that you have used with any clients you coach or with yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first important part is like making sure that supplements are kind of, an addition, right? Like you said,
Yes.
the foundation has to be there. Obviously, a plant-based diet will help a lot. But as we know, just because something is vegan doesn't always mean it's healthy. So in general, I think a lot of times it's more about like what we don't include in our diet. So trying to limit processed sugar, processed food, those foods that will just cause your blood sugar to spike and then crashes afterwards. And it can, especially if you're someone who is more prone to anxiety as well, it doesn't help with that. So also just making sure that you're not under eating, because that can cause a lot of stress on your
Hmm.
body just as much as overeating does. Not skipping meals all the time, right? So having that structured schedule. So I think those basics come first. If you don't have those in place and you just try to add supplements, you're not going to get very far and not going to get very far. It's like building a house, right? That foundation needs to be there first. I personally have included ashwagandha, and I do like magnesium supplement.
Hmm.
glycinate is the one that I use before bed, specifically because it does help me relax and kind of calm down in the evening time. So those are the two that I like to use, but I'm wondering if you have any other recommendations with that.
Those are two that I also use. So the ashwagandha, the magnesium. Many people are familiar with a product called Calm. So you can get magnesium in the citrate, the glycinate, the threonate. There's a lot of different formulations, but I do think that there are some relaxation benefits to that magnesium that can also facilitate sleep. And I would love to get your thoughts on what recommendations you may have regarding sleep, because you know how much I love to talk about sleep. There are the science behind some of I mentioned rhodiola. I do think that some of the adaptogens that may be beneficial at lowering systemic cortisol may be helpful at managing stress, especially chronic stress. But again, the supplements are supplemental. They're not meant to take the place of trying to reduce the stressor in whatever way possible, or find healthful ways, whether it's going for a walk. I love mindful breathing, just as you mentioned. Haven't done much tapping. I'd love at some point to have a conversation about essential oils, because I actually find when I'm stressed, sometimes I'll put on an essential oil in my office, and that just seems to bring me down to a different level. So I think there's a lot of techniques that we could share for stress reduction.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on nighttime routines and habits that promote sleep and reduce stress? Because if you're really stressed, you may not be able to get to sleep. And maybe we can tie that into tools or technologies to help track stress. I know that, I've got my Garmin, and I can actually see my stress level, my battery and my stress level on my Garmin, the same thing on my Whoop and my Aura. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on sleep, stress, and data?
Yeah, we touched on a couple of those, as far as like, winding down, limiting screen time before bed. I think that's a huge one. I will say another one that I see very frequently is inconsistency in sleep schedule that will make this process a lot more challenging, especially if you're someone who is like, you're working all week and then you want to have a little more fun on the weekends and you stay
Don't
up
do
late.
it.
Like it's really hard, and I know it's tempting, but it's hard, and it like takes you then a few days to get back into the schedule, and then by the time that you do, the weekend comes again, and it's really hard to manage your internal and regulate your internal clock that way. So like consistent sleep schedule, same wake up time, same bedtime helps a lot. I think always like trying to optimize your sleep environment, making sure that it's cool, quiet, dark. You can use even a sound machine. We had at the retreat, we had Coach Megan
Coach Megan.
bring her sound machine, and we were all loving it. So that can help a lot. Now we're all on the sound machine train after she introduced it to us. So that can definitely help. Avoiding caffeine before bed or not before bed, but at least like 8 hours prior to bedtime would be helpful. I think this one goes without saying, but alcohol, just altogether, it might make you feel like you fall asleep faster, but the quality of sleep that you get is it's just going to make it so much more challenging to manage your stress. And then I think as far as, tracking, you're definitely more experienced with all of the technology that's out there than me. I personally love using my Aura Ring. I know Whoop has similar features with tracking sleep as well. And the big thing that they track is heart rate variability, which can be a good indicator of stress and recovery as well. But I guess if you don't want to invest in something like that, I think tracking your habits and tracking your sleep yourself can be a good way to do it. You can even do it just in like in Excel spreadsheets, although they're apps. I think the Streaks or Habitica are good ones if you want to like track the habits. I also love Mood Fit, which is for kind of like tracking your mood throughout the day as well, and you can notice some patterns and recognize what you need to improve there. Um, so those are a couple of like the apps that I personally use. And then this is not an app, but it helps a lot. Noise canceling headphones. If you're like trying to wind down, have that routine in the evening, and you want to like listen to something calming or like do a meditation with it, I think that can be also very helpful. But I'm curious to know if you have any other ones, because I know you are very, very experienced with that.
I think you touched on most of them. And again, the data, health data is great, but it's not meant to overwhelm or to paralyze you. So starting with the basics and just understanding your habits is great. And I think that the data can be a nice adjunct to that to help you make informed decisions about how do you better optimize things or where you have opportunities to improve. But I don't want to detract from the simple things like your schedule, making sure your sleep environment is good, avoiding the caffeine, the alcohol. Those are low-lying fruit. And that can precede anything else in terms of measurement, just to see if you feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, like you mentioned, the schedule, I know that doesn't correlate with sleep, but I think that's an important one to mention as well. Like having a way to make your schedule more organized. I think there's a huge benefit to that, and just managing your time effectively. A lot of the time, stress comes from not having enough time in
Time
the day to do
management.
all of the things that we need to do. So having tools that, whether it's Google Calendar or I also love Notion as well for my organizational skills, it can really help. Also, one thing that I found is scheduling the time for yourself in your calendars, like making it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I even suggest people who have trouble with finding
Yeah.
time for workouts, I even suggest like create an appointment with yourself.
Yeah.
Like you're much more likely to do it if you block that time off, if you like send yourself a Google invite, even like send a reminder, it helps a lot. But yeah, I think that time management has a big role with that too.
And I mean, people may think it sounds goofy, but that time, even I've been using an app called Reclaim AI, and it'll look at my meetings on my calendar and it'll schedule a de-stress period for meetings. Like if I have a leadership meeting, a de-stress period after that.
Yeah.
Because even during the course of your day, if you're back to back to back to back, you're operating here all day. You need to find 5 or 10 minutes when you can walk away from your desk, when you can just, whether it's tend to your healthful habits, go to the restroom, get a glass of water, go stand outside and ground yourself, take off your shoes. Even 5 minutes can make a difference. But I, like you, have found that if I schedule it and also communicate that respect these times just as you would respect any other meeting.
Yep, make it a non-negotiable. I know we talked about that previously. Make sure that that's a priority as well. I know sometimes it feels like, oh, I don't have time for it, but I think the saying goes
Yeah.
like when we feel like we don't have the time for self-care, that's when we need it the most. So it's
Exactly.
not a selfish thing to do, because then you're able to show up as a better employee, as a better family member, wife, husband. Like you're just able to show up better when you do schedule that time for yourself. So it's not a wasted time. I know that's easy to slip into that mindset. I think that you're being selfish for it, but it's really needed.
And speaking of selfish, I would encourage people to read the book Selfish by Dr. Columbus Batiste, where he also emphasizes a lot of the things. Another one that can be good to de-stress, and it's something a guilty pleasure of mine, is before I go to bed, before I turn off my devices, I'll watch an episode of Friends, because just laughing is an amazing way to de-stress.
I love that. I have my own comfort shows as well. It just helps you like watch something that you know how it's going to end, and it's just the feeling that it produces. So that's a really good tip too.
And Tiana, before we wrap up, I did want to touch a little bit more on mindset, because you talked about boundaries, you talked about scheduling time. What other, and part of these are habits, but there also has to be a mindset around managing stress. What recommendations do you have for the community related to mindset and stress and managing stress before it manages you?
Yeah, and I think this one is so important, because as we always talk about, like, everything always starts with mindset, and stress is no different. We mentioned that just like having the perspective that managing your stress, it's not a luxury, it's essential to showing up as your best self. And so again, not looking at it as a chore, or not looking at it as wasted time, or something that you're selfish for doing. And then also, I think it's understanding that it's not just about, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's not just about feeling better in the moment, it's about that longevity, right? When you have that consistency, when you have those habits, it is really about living a better life overall. Yeah, it helps you in the moment. That like 5-minute meditation that you do will help you feel less anxious in the moment, but it's also, how does all of that add up? Kind of like workouts, right? You're not going to notice maybe a huge difference after one workout. You might feel better in the moment, but body wise, you're not going to notice a huge difference. However, when you have consistency with it, you do see the results. And so I think approaching it from that perspective also is really valuable. And then starting small. If you're not doing anything right now, don't create yourself a to-do list of like, I have to meditate for an hour each day, like work out for, like, it's a lot. So start
That's too much
small.
stress.
5 minutes is enough, and then progress from there, and you'll get to that point where it's a little bit easier to manage stress overall.
Tiana, what would, and thank you for saying that, because it's easy to listen to our conversation today. And first of all, if you're listening or you're watching and you're stressed, just take a minute. And I would encourage you to do some box breathing. So some 4-4-4 breathing, just listening to our voices and trying to find a way to lower your stress before we wrap up this live stream and you go to the next activity in your day. The other thing, maybe just close your eyes and just listen to us as we wind up today, and just think about some of the recommendations you've heard from Coach Tiana around what you can do in your own life in order to identify stressors and then manage stressors. Ideally, prevention would be good, but there's never going to, that's a fallacy that our life will be stress-free. And as we shared earlier, there's eustress, the good stress, and the distress, the not so good stress. But the real trick is acknowledging and acting. Tiana, if there was one thing you would recommend to anyone listening or watching who feels like stress is managing them that they could do today, what would it be?
Yeah, and I wanted to give also this analogy, because I think this will help with just kind of wrapping it all up. Is imagine your stress as a bucket, and you're just keep pouring water in that bucket, right? Like workouts, again, good stressor, but still adds water to that bucket. Life stressors, family, like everything just keeps adding water and more water to that bucket. And if you don't take some water out, you are going to get to the point where it overflows, and it leads to a burnout, and it leads to crashing. And so it's not always like, how can I just keep adding more stuff? Sometimes it's taking that step back and seeing like, okay, how can I take some water out of that bucket? And I think really easy way to do that is today, if you feel like your water bucket is getting full, take 5 minutes and just do some box breathing, like Daphne said, or download the Calm app, or like Headspace app, a lot of the great meditations app out there, and just start with 5-minute meditation. It doesn't have to be more than that. And you'll notice the benefits over time if you do it consistently, and you'll be able to increase time as well as you go. But start with 5 minutes today. That's all that it takes.
And that's a great, and we can all take 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to encourage everyone, remember, stress is something that we all face, but with the right tools and the right daily habits and some of the advice that Tiana shared today, you can learn how to manage stress, whether it's improving your sleep, cleaning up your environment, incorporating mindful movement, just mindfulness in general, every small step adds up, but it's the consistency that's key. You don't necessarily want to try mindful breathing today and then forget about it for the next month. But I do want to have a quick call to action. If you're feeling overwhelmed by stress or struggling to make lasting changes, don't hesitate to ask for help and find community support. Asking for help is sometimes the biggest sign of strength that we can all demonstrate. Start by incorporating just one of the tips that Coach Tiana shared today and watch how small changes can have a big impact. Tiana, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about how to manage stress before it manages you.
Thank you, Daphne.
As we wrap up, I want to give everyone a quick reminder. Next Wednesday, September 25th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, please join us. We'll have Chef AJ on our live stream talking about her latest book, Sweet Indulgence, Guilt-Free Treats Sweetened Naturally with Fruit. I have the book. I have it here somewhere in my room, and it's an amazing book. I can't wait to have this conversation, and I hope you'll be able to join us. Thank you so much for joining us on the Vegan Gym Live. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who might benefit from learning how to manage stress in their life. Take care, be well, and we hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.